Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning, and welcome to For the Record. Today, Friday, the 26th day of January 2017. A little windy out there. I think the winds are supposed to be anywhere between 15 and 20 or 20 and 25 miles per hour. It's about 16 right now, pretty windy, which means it'll be cool as well. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, you know For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor. My two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Markfield, with me as well. You're welcome to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. Normally, it is that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number, provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. You can also send us a WhatsApp to our WhatsApp number. That number is 925-3261, where we ask you to send us a text or you leave a voice note. That voice note will be played over the air as well. So that WhatsApp number is 925-3261. Of course, we always like to hear from you. We do realize that we have a limited amount of time. There's only a show of 2 hours, and within those 2 hours, we have to pack our commercial as well, because somebody has to pay the bills. So we have to have commercial time in there. So we try to, we don't limit callers to time, but we ask everyone to be as precise and as concise as possible so that we do not deny anyone the opportunity who wants to say something to be able to do that as well. So without any further ado, this morning, of course, is the time that we have set aside for the official opposition in our legislative assembly. And it is our pleasure to have in the studio with us this morning Mr. Alva Suku, who represents the constituency of Newlands in our legislative assembly. Mr. Suku, good morning, sir. Welcome to For the Record, and a Happy New Year to you.
Morning, and Happy New Year to all of you. Yeah, it's been a while. I think I've been on and in the early part of this year, and I think it was quite some time before that.
Yes.
So Happy New Year. Hope everybody's having a good start to the year.
Yep.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and the timing is perfect as well, but we'll keep that little secret for a little while before we go. I want to say good morning to my two co-hosts as well, Ms. T, Dr. Macfield. Good morning.
Good morning, OC. Good morning, Mr. Suku. A pleasure to see you as always. Good morning, Dr. Macfield. I am actually going to go straight into it. And should I also say a special good morning to all of our listeners, whether they're on island with us and in the diaspora. And thank you so very much for inviting us into your space, your special space, as we share the discussions. Before I even got up this morning, I got a note from someone who was cognizant of the possibility of the opposition being on today, sent me a note and asked that I raise this issue with whomever is here with the opposition. And I'll just read it very quickly. It says, "Good morning. Here's a question suggestion for you to discuss. Why don't we adopt the same procedures for our arriving passengers from the airlines as is done in the United Kingdom? Simply using the electronic chop installed on our passports. Just hold the passport up as you pass through the immigration. It will sure save us some money on a not-for-sure system by sending our officers to Miami to process the passengers, etc., etc." So I'll just drop that in there, doing my duty. People send me a lot of stuff, and this was asked. It was asked that I raise this with whomever. I didn't know it was you. I mean, yeah. All right, so that's it. It just throws you in there, whatever, you know. Yeah.
Doc, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. For the record. Good morning to Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Good morning to our guest, Mr. Al Sakur, the deputy leader of the opposition. And good morning to all the people in For the Record land locally and those that listen to you abroad. I know that you have a vast following. Europe, the United States, Central America, and South America. So I want to say good morning to all of them, all of those people. And this is the last day of the week for the record show, and I'm looking forward to our guest this morning, Mr. McCool. What is contribution this morning to the show?
Okay, Mr. Suka, we're going to throw the mic right over to you.
Well, I don't know if you wanted to go into that first question. I haven't had much time to think about it, but just to voice my opinion, I agree that we need to get a bit more technology savvy with immigration and how we handle these things. One of the concerns I had and I raised recently is that we allocated in the budget a lot of money for fingerprinting, and as far as I understand, that still isn't being done. So I'm a little weary. While I support the idea, I'm a little wary of the fact that we can't seem to get some basic things done, and I think we need to sort things out at that level. I think IT as a whole, which is my background throughout the government organization, someone needs to take a serious look at that and try to figure out how we're going to move forward. I know that e-government is making big strides. I was part of that initiative. But
Mr. Ian Tibbetts is still heading
yes,
that up?
As far as I'm aware, Ian Tibbetts, and it's now under Minister Hugh.
Okay.
So, I have confidence that he will see the relevance and the importance of pushing forward with e-government. But at a very basic level, before you even get to e-government, there are issues with just the infrastructure throughout the civil service, throughout government. And I know during the austerity times that we didn't invest very much in technology as far as the government is concerned, and we're now, I think, suffering from that to a large extent. Simple things like MLAs being down at the LA and can't get access to printers or the system to be able to do research or, even print a document. Things like that plague us down at the LA, so I can only imagine what it's like for other departments. I know some have taken on their own IT department, basically. I know education does that, and the schools do it. But we need to really look at that whole centralized solution and see if it's really fit for purpose now, and how do we clear up some of the mess and move forward. We can't implement things like this, this person is suggesting, without that infrastructure being intact and working properly. So I think based on my experience for 2 years as part of the Progressives, I knew that there was a lot of work on infrastructure that had to be done, and I'm not sure how much progress has been made on that front.
And I know that some concerns had been expressed in the past about or tourists or visitors coming to the island. But there's an expectation of that. The United States does it every time you go in there. I thought their system was in such a way that, once they did the fingerprint one time and the photograph, that what would happen after that would be a verification process where they would verify it. But every time you go in, they ask you to do your fingerprint, and they take the photograph of you as well. So there is a general expectation from the public now that you have certain security measures in place. So I don't think that we should be fearful of that. One of the challenges still with our Cayman passports, though, is that you have persons who hold a Cayman passport. They have the right to reside permanently in the islands, but there may be other restrictions on them. For instance, they may have permanent residence with the right to work. Of course, once you become a permanent resident, if you've been living here for 5 years and 12 months after becoming a permanent resident, you're eligible to be registered as a British Overseas Territorial citizen or naturalized as a British Overseas Territorial citizen. Once that naturalization process has been completed and finalized, you're then entitled to apply for Cayman Islands passport. So there may be some nuances with just simply being able to flash the Cayman passport, but there must be some. You see all over the place now where you have these registration systems that you can go in and register as a frequent traveler or whatever, and then they have the expedited lines for you. But let's see what happens now with the what is being piloted in Florida, in Miami. In terms of the pre-clearance there. Let's see what happens with that. But certainly it's an opportunity for those who are in charge of immigration to really show their creativity and the initiative to get those things done. We have an upgraded, renovated, modern airport facility. We should have all of the functions that go with that need to be applied as well.
And as I understand it, the pre-clearance is only for inbound passengers.
Yes.
So I know a few people got excited because they thought that we would Caymanians be able to get pre-cleared going out. And I said no. But I'm glad to see that the government has put that in place, because I recall the discussions being around the how expensive it would be, and because we would have to fund it and staff it. So it's but it's a boost for tourism experience for our visitors. So I'm not so much against it. Some people are because of the cost, but I see the benefit to tourism by being able to offer it.
Yeah. And the the pre-clearance going out now as well, where you don't have to. Most of those airlines now are cleared. So for tourists, they simply give their immigration card to the airline agent, and there are several flights that are now are pre-cleared as well. That makes a huge difference now
In the wait
when
times.
you after you clear security to be able to go right through as well. But we want to talk about the real exciting thing this morning, Mr. Suku. We have news now that we have our second advisory district council that has been created, and we are certainly very anxious to hear about that. We have about 2 minutes before we go to a commercial break, so you can just do the introduction to it if you want, and then we'd like to talk about that.
But certainly, and I'm excited as well, because this is something that I campaigned on and I promised, and I really do believe the people that I met with when I was campaigning in Newlands were very much in support of this. And so I've gone ahead and we have created the Advisory District Council for Newlands. And they actually had their first meeting on January 16th. And and this initial group is what you would call the executive of the District Council. These are all people who have come forward and volunteered their time. And what I've tried to do, keep it in a nutshell, is to balance it. So these are not Al Suku supporters throughout Newlands. These are obviously some people who would have supported me, but people who would have supported Mr. Panton and Mr. Gonzalez. As a matter of fact, Mr. Gonzalez is a member.
Oh,
so and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. But I'm pleased to say that I did my endeavor best to make sure it was balanced. It was not a political group, because this is not for me to campaign. This is not a mechanism for me to campaign through. This is a mechanism for us to work together for the constituency. And I'm really pleased with the way it's turned out. And I'm extremely pleased that the chairman is Mr. Olson Anderson, who some of you may know from Cayman Airways.
Yes.
And, I couldn't have asked for a better chairman. He is very organized, very driven, very committed to the community. He lives in Newlands. And, I was so pleased when he volunteered his time. Nobody gets compensated for doing this. This is all volunteer work. So I'm extremely pleased that we have gotten this done, this accomplished, because it's one of my biggest promises during the campaign, and I wanted to deliver on this one quickly.
Folks, please stay tuned. We're going to a commercial break. When we return, our conversation will continue with Mr. Alva Suku, the deputy leader of the opposition and the MLA who represents the constituency of Newlands in our Legislative Assembly. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Alva Suku, MLA, Mr. Alva Suku, also the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. And amongst other things this morning, we're discussing the creation of an advisory district council in the constituency of Newlands. So we're going to throw the mic back over to Mr. Suku.
Okay. Well, just continuing on, the members of this council, and I want to preface this by saying this body, I'm not a member of this body. This body is an advisory to the MLA. So going through this process, we were talking just before we came back on about how it was done. I didn't have, as Mr. Macfield was asking me about, a local election in Newlands. The process that I went through to get the membership of this committee organized was where we would, at my 3 district meetings that I've had so far, at each meeting we asked the people to volunteer themselves if they want to be involved in a district council. Of those people who have volunteered, we then had a meeting and they decided amongst themselves what roles they would play. So I wasn't part of that decision-making process other than to facilitate the meeting. And going forward, I won't be involved in the executive. How this will work is that they meet, they set their agenda, they do their community meetings, and they advise me. So I'm not going to be hands-on. I'm actually very hands-off. They have a WhatsApp group that I'm not even a part of, so I don't see their discussions, their deliberations, and I don't influence at all. The idea of how this is working is that this body will do its work and advise me on the issues and the objectives and so on that they want me to pursue in Newlands. And that's how it's going to operate going forward. I know that there'll be some criticism that, I should have, as Mr. Macfield was stating, that I should have had basically an election within Newlands and the whole community get together and do that. I could have done that, but I'm following the way I read the law, which is that the membership of these councils are now appointed, not elected. Once we change the law, then we may have to go back to that point.
No, Mr. Soko.
But
let me read what Section 4 says. A council shall consist of the following members, all of whom shall be appointed by the governor and cabinet: chairman, vice chairman, treasurer, secretary treasurer, and 6 other members. And in making the appointments, the governor and cabinet shall be cognizant of the recommendations to him from within the electoral districts. So the district sends the recommendations of the people they want to have to be their district council, and the governor appoints and cabinet appoints them.
That phrase shall be cognizant. What does it mean? Because it's slightly different from acting on the recommendations of, or acting on the what 2 terminology used: acting on based on advice, and acting on that advice as opposed to just simply consultation.
Well, cognizant
so
means
which one does it
cognizant mean that you
recognize,
take notice of the recommendation that has come to you.
But they're not bound by it. It doesn't say that that is bound.
But it's not the government that appoints. It's not a government that selects the council. That's the whole thing. The government appoints them once they have been selected by the district.
Okay, what's the difference between appointment? What's the difference between appointment and selection?
Because the district council said these are the people we want to represent us, and they send those names to the government. And the government,
there's nothing here that indicates that the government is bound by that.
That is not the point I'm making. That is not the point I'm making. The point that I'm making is that you don't select people to be the district council by yourself or by themselves.
Point taken.
You go and you bring you send a notice out to all your constituents in your district, and you say the reason why for a meeting is for you to form a district council. You bring them into a hall and you say the district council consists of a chairman, a vice chairman, a secretary, a treasurer, and 6 other members, and we want you now to select those people. and they will nominate Teresa Pitcairn. It's seconded, and if and any other nomination for chairperson, and then they would say, well, we are going to take the vote now, and all those who want Ms. Pitcairn hold up their hands, or all those who want Mrs. C hold up their hands, and if Ms. Pitcairn get the amount, then she will be the chairperson. Then you go down the line, and then those are the people that have become your district council, and then you send them to the governor for appointment.
But Doc, let's look at and sorry, Mr. Suku, for cutting you off there. But let's look at section 4.1e, right?
Yeah.
And then you have in addition to those, you have other members as well, not exceeding 6 other members, at least 2 of whom shall be subject to subsection 2, be recommended by the leader of the opposition appointed under section 68 of the Constitution. So in addition, so you have other appointments there as well by the leader
of the opposition.
That's
right.
And the premier.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's not for. I am not criticizing you for this. I'm saying it's not for somebody to volunteer to be chairperson and you select that person to be chairperson.
Like it didn't happen.
So the reason for a district council is because you do not have to be an elector to become a member of the district council. It says anyone who is resident in the district.
Yeah.
And that's a problem that I found when we first started this, when we went around to districts. And people found out that, well, there were certain people here who, with the government, who brought this law in, they were out of favor with the government. And when I explained to them, they say, can we be on a council? Yes, you can be on a council. You don't have, and people say, well, we didn't want that at all. And then the whole thing was shut down. In other words, and the reason for it, and listen to this now, it says, without limiting the scope of subsections, when the council for an electoral district may advise in relation to finance, tourism, development, immigration-related matters, district administration, works, gender affairs, education, training, employment, community affairs, housing, health, environment, youth, sports, culture, and any other matters affecting the district. And the reason for that is we have a lot of people who are we call expatriates, who are not registered voters, but they have a lot of talent, and they have it, and they have a lot of professional experience that can benefit the district, and that's the reason why the law was written, so we could use their talent and their experience.
Okay, let's give Mr. Suku a shot before we go to the news. I think we've got about 1 minute before we go to news.
Well, I mean, just go. As I said, I didn't have a full-blown election, but what I did was, at each community meeting, I asked the people to put their names down on a piece of paper. We then contacted all the people who have come forward, and I said to them, you all now go and form a district council. And that's basically how it happened. They elected amongst themselves the executive level. Okay. The next step for me now is to go and write to the premier and say these are the people, and can you appoint them?
Okay, folks, please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back immediately after the news. Lots more to discuss about the advisory district councils as well. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Mr. Alva Suku, Deputy Leader of the Opposition and MLA who represents the constituency of Newlands in our Legislative Assembly, and Dr. Steve Macfield. Before we went to our 8 o'clock news, we were having quite a robust discussion about the Advisory District Council that has been established by Mr. Suku, and we've also been talking about the Advisory District Council's law. And before I throw the mic back over to Mr. Suku, I want to remind our listening and viewing audience that in the past I have spoken about this. Being the cabinet secretary during the constitutional negotiations, I had the privilege and honor of being in those discussions and seeing what was going on, because the constitutional review secretariat was placed under the cabinet office. I have pointed out in the past that the whole concept of advisory district councils was one that was pushed by the Honorable W. McKeever Bush, who was leader of the opposition at that point in time. There was not a whole lot of discussions on it during the constitutional talks. As a matter of fact, on the last day at Lancaster House, it was discussed briefly, and it was agreed at that point in time that it would be placed, the requirements for advisory district councils would be placed in our constitution, and we in the Cayman Islands would develop a law to govern the formation and the functioning of advisory district councils. So that took place. My other position is that the creation of advisory district councils and their functioning should not be one that is politically motivated. The law that we have in place is a law like all other laws that are passed by the Legislative Assembly, but in most instances, 9 times out of 10, it is legislation that is put forward by the governing party, the governing group. That's the case with our current law in relation to advisory district councils. And once that takes place, you're going to find that there are provisions in that law, in those laws, that are leaning one way or the other, either to support the current government in the positions that they have taken, or in the event that government becomes an opposition, to also ensure that there are some protections there for the opposition. So it's like hedging your bet. You're hedging your bet. That is exactly what has happened here. Now, we have heard that this piece of legislation, the advisory district councils, actually it's called, when it was introduced, it was a bill for a law to provide for the establishment of advisory district councils to operate as advisory bodies to the elected members of the Legislative Assembly and for incidental and connected purposes. So it has been said that this piece of legislation needs tweaking. I would go a little further than that and say that it needs major overhaul. It needs major overhaul because there are certain things that are not addressed in there. And because they're not addressed in there, we have to look at what generally happens in other jurisdictions, or what we would normally do. For instance, the appointment of the members of the council. There are no provisions, there are no regulations that say what process should be followed in that. So that's just one example. So this piece of legislation needs major overhaul, not just tweaking, major overhaul. Now, coming back to you, Mr. Suku, you have basically created your advisory district council based on the legislation that we have, and at some point in time, we're hoping that legislation will change. But in the meantime, you like Mr. Miller, and Mr. Miller actually had his in place before the legislation came into being, have put something in place. We have tried to encourage other members of the Legislative Assembly to do the same, as well. So let me throw the mic back.
And I am aware. I know Mr. Eden is currently now making plans to have his council created, and I will do what I can to assist him in that process as well. It's been a learning process, and as you rightfully pointed out, the law isn't really helpful in deciding how you get the membership sorted out and so on. It leaves a lot open to your own discretion, basically. And I agree that the law needs to be, I think it needs a major overhaul. But I have to work with what I'm given, so that's what I've done. I've moved forward. And the important thing is that we now have a Newlands District Council. It doesn't stop here, because what has to happen now is that this council has to grow in membership, and also start to perform its work. So, the names that have come forward that are what I consider the executive. This is getting it off the ground, moving it forward. And who knows, next year the composition may change, but at the very least, I'm very grateful for these individuals for coming forward and helping me get this done. And I'm pleased that we've gotten this far.
Okay. Have you submitted those names now to cabinet?
Not yet. I'm actually working on sending that now. Okay. I'll do that by early next week, and not expecting a whole lot back other than yes or no, but I'll ask for those people to be appointed.
Well, at least this will be the first time that cabinet would then be presented with something, and it'll be interesting to see now what they come back, with in terms of response to you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll see, but regardless, I'm moving forward. I can't wait for the government to decide when they're going to make changes to the law, when they're going to start creating their councils, when they're going to start making use of this very important mechanism in our democracy that brings people closer to their government and makes the government more accountable. So I have to weigh all those things, and I decided it's needed and it's time to move forward. So, and I have mine now created. And that's the most important aspect of it, participatory democracy. This gives the people more of a voice in their constituency. And, I was one of the people who went out and advocated for single-member constituencies, one person, one vote. This is part and parcel of that. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't make this a priority for Newlands. I think people elected me knowing my position on all of those issues and what I was likely to do once elected. So I believe I have a mandate now to go forward and get this done. And I'm pleased that it's here. Extremely pleased. As far as the agenda for the council, the chairman and his executive and the council members will decide now what the agenda will be for Newlands and continue to work with me within the constituency to get these things accomplished. We were talking earlier during the break about funding. I know that the law says that it can be funded by the government. I don't expect any of that. What I do expect is that the council will do its own fundraising and raise funds to be able to do small projects within the constituency and get those things done as well.
And in looking at Section 4, subsection 5 of the current law, you can see here that it anticipates the creation of single-member constituencies as well, because it reads, if single-member constituencies were to be introduced or new electoral districts added, subsection 4 shall apply to them in the same way as it applies to constituencies existing at the commencement of this law.
Right. So it anticipated the creation of single-member constituencies.
Doc, and anything you want to comment on?
Well, while I commend Mr. Suku for at least getting some semblance of a district council together, I still say that it's not for the elected members of the district to select the people who are on the district council. That is very clear. That is not democratic. The way to select them is the way Mr. Miller did it. You call all of the members of your district together in one place, and you tell them the reasons for the meeting. That the meeting is to nominate members for a district council and to elect them then and there. You don't have to have. When I say election, I don't mean what election like when you're electing for a general election. And you ask people from the floor to nominate the chairman, to nominate the vice chairman, to nominate the secretary and the treasurer and the members, and you have secondment, and then you ask for the show of hands or whatever you want to do of who the choice is for those positions. And once they do that, then that's a democratic method. The district has spoken and said, these are the people we want to represent us. But it's not for somebody to send in their name and then they are appointed as members of the district council. That is not how democracy and how it works.
Got that. Okay.
And just, because I don't want people to start thinking now that, and I'm worried about where this conversation is going. I don't want people to start getting the impression that Al Suku created this council. Yes, I did ask for volunteers. Of those people who volunteered, and these were done publicly at public meetings, those individuals were then told to go and create a district council. I didn't have any say in the selection of the membership, who performs what role. I was completely hands off. I wasn't even at the meeting that they had in January. So, I don't want people to start getting the impression, because the reason why I reached out to Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Panton to volunteer people or themselves to come forward to be part of this is I don't want to be accused of creating an election-winning group that is going to go out now and advocate for me throughout Newlands. This group has no such mandate. This group goes out and does the constituencies' work and advises me, and Mr. Raoul is on there, which I think is proof that I went across the board. Mr. Panton hasn't gotten back to me. He said he would get back to me, and he hasn't. I couldn't wait. Move forward. If he comes forward now with people who want to be involved, they'll be accepted, warmly welcomed. This isn't a vote-winning scheme. This is Newlands needs a district council, and we all need to work together for the community.
Okay. We have one question for on our WhatsApp, and I don't know if you want to continue along the district advisory district council, because I'm sure there are other things that you want to talk about as well, and I want to give you the opportunity. But this person has said that they live in Newlands, and they wanted to know when and where those meetings were held because they weren't aware of it.
But I don't have the specific dates, but the meetings were at the Bordentown, the Savannah Primary School in the hall.
Okay.
I've had 3 so far.
Okay. And they were all publicly announced?
Yeah,
Yes.
radio. I put it all out on my social media. I have a WhatsApp group in Newlands. So, the information is out there. We're getting a little better at giving people more notice, because I noticed people didn't show up because of there was one meeting, there was a low attendance because, it wasn't announced. I think giving people enough time to decide if they were coming or not. It was done a few days before. But what I'm trying to do is actually stick to a schedule now. 1 meeting every quarter, which is another campaign promise.
Okay.
And I've stuck to that so far. So there'll be one coming up in February, and I'll make sure to announce with
advance.
good advance notice.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to throw the mic back over to you again, Mr. Suku, so that you can talk about some of the things, the topics that you want to discuss. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Mr. Al Suku, and Dr. Steve MacField. We have 2 callers, so we're going to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning to everyone.
Morning.
Mr. Al, and I call in to Basha, and I call in to Shemia, but you know who it is. I don't have to call name because they say about I know this big mouth. But I want to say I'm still waiting on the light. It's needed very much. I had to walk out to Foster's last night in the pitch black dark, and I don't understand what the problem is, because the poles are there is just to get to CUC to put the light. So I'm begging you, please, we send you the pole number and everything, and if you think that I'm telling you, give me a story, you can come down here when it gets dark and I can show you the area, and it's pitch black on both sides, and it is bushy, and I am scared to walk in and out there because Cayman has gotten too bad, which I'm afraid of nobody, but they could grab your back on. If they grab me face on, I'm afraid, because I always have something that they either kill me or I kill them, and I'll stick it in them. But they can sneak up on you like a thief in the night, and down in there is terrible.
Well, I have submitted the requests, and I'm waiting now for a meeting with the minister in early February to find out what they're going to get done for Newlands as far as road works, lighting, all that sort of stuff. So by early February, I'll be able to tell you when it's happening.
Well, I hope so, because the wild grass growing, the horse starve, and the light is not only for my good, because you got family members living in here that I guess will use it too.
No, it's been submitted. I submitted that quite a while ago.
Okay. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, panel.
Good morning. How are you?
Mr. Suku, this is for you, sir. Just to make the public, help you with the public. You had 2 meetings at Newlands to True. And just people, I didn't came neither, all the way from Newlands, the Newlands district. But you had your meetings, so I just make the public also know that I try to help you. Make people know you had the meetings. It was you and Mr. Eden. So I just put that piece in for you this morning, sir.
Okay, thanks very
God
much.
bless you. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank
too.
you very much, caller. Thank you, Mr. Suku.
I don't know if we wanted to continue down the discussion of.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
One thing that I wanted to raise is that you know, and I've been raising it sort of quietly with the government itself, but the whole issue around collections, we still need of garbage. I still get a lot of beaten up when it comes to this, because people are getting really frustrated with the situation. I actually was fortunate enough to have a short conversation with the chief officer yesterday, and I understand a bit more what is happening. It's definitely a resource issue, but you know, that doesn't negate the fact that people are frustrated.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We do have, I think this was sent out by GIS yesterday, and it's headed Alteration to Garbage Collection Schedule, and it reads: the Department of Environmental Health will provide garbage collection services to all outstanding areas tomorrow, Friday the 26th of January. Residents normally scheduled for Friday collection will instead be collected on Saturday, the 27th of January. So that's something that just came out from them yesterday as well for that.
Yeah, and while you know, we've been hearing different sort of explanations for what's going on, I did call in the government, and I explained to the chief officer, I'm not beating up on her in particular, but we need answers. We need to know what the long-term plan is. We need to know why the situation has come about, what is being done to rectify it, because we keep hearing conflicting reports. We're hearing staff shortages, we're hearing equipment failures, then we're hearing one other government department saying, no, it's not equipment. So we need to know, we need to understand, because people are getting frustrated. And when you think about, especially the eastern districts, where I know collections are once a week at best, and we're starting to get feedback, not just from our people, but from visitors, and the state of the streets, and the garbage thrown down, rodents starting to breed. And it's becoming very unhealthy. I'm aware that the hospital itself, who have medical waste that needs to be disposed of, is not getting regular collection. So you know, we're calling ourselves an advanced society. We pride ourselves as a jewel of the Caribbean when it comes to financial services and tourism, and we can't get our garbage collected on time. And it's really boiled over to where now I would have to speak publicly on it, because I sit every day and I get the complaints from my constituents, and I'm tired now of shooting back excuses that are passed on to me. Oh, you know, tell them it'll be there tomorrow, tell them it'll be done by the weekend. We need more than that, and I'm calling out the minister responsible. He's a Bordentown resident, he's a minister in Bordentown. He needs to meet with the other MLAs in Bordentown, let us know what is happening, and let us try to work on this together and try to find a solution, because clearly, you know, we can't wait 6 months, another year for the situation to be rectified. I've had limited conversations with him, but I am appealing to him to please try and do something about the situation, but consult with the other MLAs in the district. You know, we have to deal with this, tackle this together, because I don't know if he's aware, but constituents are getting fed up. So that situation needs to be addressed.
Ms. T, you have any questions for Mr. Suku? Any question? Okay.
It's going to be a short show. But there are other things that we could talk about.
Sure. Go right ahead.
I saw the recent, I don't want to call it argument, but I know the Premier and the Chief Justice are having their issues over the courthouse, and the need for a new courthouse. And, you know, I may have an opinion that some people don't agree with on that, but I do believe we need a new courthouse, a new court. New courthouse, basically, no matter, and that can be defined differently. You may not have it all in one place or whatever, but we need the facilities. I was at the opening of the Grand Court recently, and I don't spend much time in the courthouse, but when I do get the opportunity, I do look around and I talk to people, and it's badly needed. Not just from the point of view of needing a physical structure, but in terms of what this means for democracy. All the arms of government, the pillars of government, you can't have one being held ransom by the other. And I'm not saying that that's deliberately being done, but in not providing the facilities for a proper courthouse, and I'm using that term loosely, the judicial is limited in its scope and what it can do for the people. And I'm not talking about listening to or judging criminal trials. I'm talking about when you have situations where there are lawsuits, there's civil issues. Someone may be an employee of a company who's been wronged and trying to have their day in court. Those sorts of things erode your democracy if you don't allow the judicial to perform its duty. And we've moved on. We've evolved past the what they like to call us, the old sleepy fishing village, where we all got along and we had our basic rules of how we engage with each other. We've now become so diverse in the people that live here, the different cultures that have come here, the different customs that have been imported here. If you don't have your judicial being able to deliver justice, then you're going to see a decay in your society. And that is, I think, the starting point that the government needs to look at this issue, not from just dollars and cents, but what it can do to your democracy when one of the pillars of your democracy is limited in performing its role. And that's the position I look at it from. And I agree with the Chief Justice that we need proper court facilities. I don't agree that we should spend every dollar we have doing it, but we need to find a solution.
And it's something that has been on the drawing board for years. The halfway pond site had been identified years ago when there was talk about moving the police headquarters. You will recall on Anton Borden Drive, there was property that was cleared there. Actually, Phil had been put in, to create a foundation. A new fire station was going to be going there. The police headquarters were going to be going there as well at that point in time. Now, there are some people who are saying, what's wrong with the current site that the court building is on? You have the parking lot there, very expensive real estate in the center of town that is just being used for parking alone. In the design of building these days, you create one floor, maybe the ground floor, for parking, and you go up. That to me is a big enough square foot area there to put a 5 or 6 story building right alongside the current courthouse.
That's what my bar. That's what my bar council represent when I was president of the bar association. We would recommend that to Sir John Summerfield and to other chief justices to go over, because it's already a parking lot there, and when you go in the courthouse, the court starts on the second floor, actually.
Yes.
And so if you put a building between the Bank of Nova Scotia and the courthouse, you have enough space there to go up 5 or 10 stories if you want to build a courthouse there. And you can have parking there, or you can have parking across the library and behind the library. So there's no need to go and buy land to build a courthouse. But they didn't reject that. We even had Public Works at the time to give us an artist rendition of what the building would look like. A steel and glass building would look like. But people don't think outside the box anymore. Everybody now is looking to have monument to themselves. But I would just like to ask you, Mr. Saku, this. Do you know how many people are living in Cayman now? What the population is?
It's supposed to be around 60,000.
Okay. How many of them are on work permits?
But I would say
20,
close
24,
to half.
Yeah.
But not quite half.
Close to half of them on work permits. Okay? 60,000 or 65,000, but whatever the amount is, close to half of them are on work permits. And would you agree with me that they are not the people who are going to courts every day? They are not the burglars and the murderers and the people who are before the courts every day. You would agree with me?
It depends on the
yeah,
area.
Yeah.
that's hard to answer.
Well, I'm there every day, nearly, and I don't see them as being the majority of people coming to court. So you have the half of the people then are not on work permits. They are the workers, and they are the children, and they are the old people who are in Cayman. Okay. We have 7 courtrooms now already that function in 7, and sometimes we use the town hall as an 8 courtroom. Don't you think that's Mr. Ku, that something is wrong in a small society where you have less than 50,000, when you have less than 30,000 people, and you have 7 and 8 courtrooms? Don't you think something is wrong socially?
Of course.
Well, if you agree with me, then you should be attacking the reasons why we have to have so many courtrooms instead of the symptoms of forming the courts.
No, but
that is the problem that I
don't
face.
think, I mean, I'm coming at that.
And just let me tell you another thing. We have a lot of problems with charging people. Sometimes people should not, the thing should not be in the court. I was in court, I think it was on Tuesday morning, representing someone, and someone asked me to represent them. And I got the papers on the Friday evening. I didn't look at them until I got into court. I got the papers on Friday evening. I went to court to ask for another mention day so I could look at the papers. And I look at the charge. I just happened to look at the charge. And the gentleman was charged with causing actual bodily harm. You know what that means, Mr. Suku? And when you look at the evidence, the policeman say, he took his arm and pushed the policeman. And the judge was saying, well, you have a choice to go to the Grand Court because it's the Grand Court case or whatever. And I say, well, what choice? There's no evidence of any actual bodily harm here. That's wasting the court's time. That's wasting the court time. And that is multiplied 1,000 times a year.
See, that's my issue. Competence.
Okay, we just have to take the commercial break, and when we come back, we'll shoot over to you, Ms. Teresa. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Alva Suku, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. And I'm going to throw the mic back over to Ms. Teresa, but in throwing it back to her, one of our listeners offline wanted to know, as far as the responsibility for providing a structure, the infrastructure for the courts, whose responsibility that is. Is it the judicial administration's function? Are they provided with the budgetary necessities to be able to construct a building, or is it the government administration that does that? So I'll let you say what you have to say first, Ms. T, and then you can probably answer that as well.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the judiciary will obviously put together needs something that the things that they need and submit that to government, and they determine whether or not they can afford it. They will they will normally deliver on certain basic needs or the most important needs. They prioritize them, and then the question is whether or not we can afford to do what Al was suggesting as to building. And this has been around, and I've been around when Dr. Macfield was talking about how we should proceed and build proper courthouse. But it comes back to the point that I sought to raise on the previous show. It's really about who you know. And I was listening this morning, when Al was talking about the district council, and the ideal for our democracy obviously is to develop a more participatory system, and you have and a more cooperative system where you have folks that live here getting involved to make the best decision for the community. The problem with that, as I said last week, Wednesday, was that we live in a community where it depends on who you know. It's not about the best ideas. It's not about who can. And let me just be clear with this. You don't have to love the people who live here or love the Cayman Islands necessarily to have the ability to do what is right. I worked in an environment where folks didn't like each other, but at the end of the day, they respected the bottom line, which was the dollars and cents. So they did whatever it took to ensure that the funding and the monies that were there, they did what they had to secure that funding. we need to get past, as I said before, where if I don't like you, OC, or if my friends don't like you, OC, I ain't giving you the job, even when you are the best person for the job. We see that we elect inept people. I mean, we just got to look to the north and we saw who the Americans elected. So politics as one of the arm of a democracy comes with its baggage. Now, we know as a small community, the people in this community who can actually do things and who have ideas. We need to get past that place where it's all about people's egos, where it's all about the friend business. Because what you do, and again, the example that comes to mind is the road that Dr. Pearson wanted to build with the support of his colleagues at the time. You know, things will fall apart simply because you don't get on with this person, you don't like this one. But our challenge, in my mind, is this tendency that we have where people want to secure or maximize their own power. And on the other hand, you have a community that is passive and that is kind of like fragmenting also as a result of bringing in so many different folks with different views. And let me be clear with that. It's not about having a different view, but you have a composition of a group of people who come from different communities with different values and who are building in strength as a result of the Caymanian people not taking and paying close attention to what is going on. What we heard about what was going on at the Westin with the different groups and with the potential for industrial dispute. You're going to see more and more of that, as I have said on this show, because there are people who live here who come from environments where they understand that they don't have to tolerate things that are undemocratic, where you're paid a salary that you know that is not a living wage. And I don't focus necessarily on us as adults. My focus has been consistently on our children because they're going to be our leaders. They are our future. So if we continue to fail them and we continue to see the environment that we're building, there's not going to be too many places left for them. There's not going to be too much space that's left for them. So to come back to the point that we started with respect to the courts and stuff, Dr. Macfield is absolutely right. Until we start to look at the symptoms, because many of the people who are here on work permits are usually white-collar people. And this is not to suggest that folks that work in white-collar jobs don't steal, because we look in the papers all the time and we're now seeing people that work in different environments that they steal as well. But you're more likely to see folks that look like me being involved with matters that are in the courts today, and we have to try and address that. But also look at reasonable ways of ensuring that, as Al rightly said, democracy doesn't suffer as a result of having inadequate structures. If we had listened to what the Bar Association had recommended ages ago about what we need to develop a proper court system, we would have it today. But again, unless you like somebody, unless you have a certain relationship with certain people, that's what happens. So I don't know when we're going to mature enough and be sensible enough to get past that.
I don't think we are going to mature.
But what bothers me, and it coming out of the finance committee, was when I saw how much money is going to the prison. Now we're building a bigger prison.
Sure.
And that,
to house us, people who look like me.
That's what worries me the most, because, and I questioned twice, and I know the Premier got upset with me because I kept bringing it up, but I had to bring it up. I FOI'd, business staffing plans have training requirements attached to them, scholarships. I FOI'd and wanted to know how many there were and how many had not been processed, how many had not been made available. And the response I got back was, we can't tell you that because it would take too many resources for us to go and dig through those files to find out how many of these training opportunities have not been given to Caymanians.
So that means nobody's keeping track.
No, and I estimate it to be probably $10 million a year. So we're throwing that money away. And a letter I got back, I can't blame the young lady that wrote me back. She's just doing her job, but she basically said, we don't have the resources to go through all these files. That means it's not being actively monitored, which means we're throwing money out the window.
Yeah. So we're building prison rooms instead of building classrooms.
Yeah. And not
and
educating
our people will be exactly where they were 100 not 80 years ago. They will be right back in economic and political and social slavery, and not one of us is doing anything about it. I don't hear the elected members doing anything about it, and that's the problem that I have, and that's the reason why I say that we have now some of the most mediocre elected members, that we ever elected in this country, because the country has gone so far backward now, even in the 21st century in modern Cayman. Here we are with near 500 policemen, 75 more we need, in a country where we just surmise that it's only at least 50,000 or 35,000 people that would need policing. And we have all these people and all this crime, and we got 7 courtrooms and an 8 one that we use. Isn't something wrong with that picture?
Yeah.
And I still can't get a police car outside Savannah Primary School in the morning to stop
For
people
the traffic,
speeding
yes.
through the school zone.
Okay. One of our listeners has said, good morning, Mr. Connor, Mr. McField, and Mrs. Suku, and Miss Teresa. Mr. Alva Suku, I find you to be a very honest man. I am very much in support of your progress in your constituency. I think you are doing an excellent job. I'm extremely pleased to hear of your effort in stepping forward to get your district councils up and going. The people of Savannah Newlands should be very proud to have you representing their constituency. I support your intelligence, honesty, and caring manner for all the people and the welfare of the Caymanians. I like that you have no time for excuses, and most of all you're on top of things in keeping your campaign promises alive. A good politician keeps his team together and stays in touch with his people. You are number one. You are number one in that area. God continue to bless you as you go forward. It says, I am one of your big supporters from Bordentown East constituency.
Okay. Well, I really do appreciate that person for saying that.
Yep.
And when you do get that sort of feedback, it makes you, because it's hard to gauge yourself and assess yourself and how you're performing. And we don't get reviews. We only get them once every 4 years. But it's good to get feedback like that, and I really do appreciate the comments. OC, I believe that I've been given an opportunity that doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come often. And when you do get it, you make the best of it, and you do as much as you can when you get that opportunity, which that's what I'm doing. I believe that I was blessed to have been chosen to be the representative in Newlands, and I'm going to do the best job I can.
Excellent. Folks, please stay tuned. We're going to headline news at 9 o'clock. For the record, we'll be back immediately after. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Before I go back to my co-host and our guest this morning, Mr. Alba Suku, two other emails came in. It says, I believe it's time, this is on fingerprint, I believe it's time the government realize and understand that the question of fingerprinting is not going to go away. Every day I see it, it is needed more. I was totally shocked this morning to hear that monies have been put in the budget for this and nothing has been done. Foot dragging again. Many campaign promises have been made but not kept. There is foot dragging from the members. The month of May will soon be here, and what will be the excuse? House will be back in sitting in March. What will members do in their constituency for such a long holiday? Same old. It's not going to be accepted. And then the person goes on to say, Miss Teresa, good morning. I sure appreciate what you are saying about the fact that we need to move forward and get over this. Quote, I don't like you or your children and will not give you the position you deserve. That's the attitude that the person is talking about. Then we need to keep Caymanians out of these deciding positions, because I, as a Caymanian, born and bred, find Caymanians always against each other. No matter how much you throw this out there, each generation is worse off.
But it's sad, see, because what we do, we employ folks from other jurisdictions and we put them in positions of power and authority. Those folks that have affiliations to their own community, they then bring in their friends and their families and they populate the positions of authority. And the key to such folks getting into these islands and into those positions of authority is opened and owned by a Caymanian. So let us not... I've said before, I don't blame any foreigner that comes here that owns and controls positions of authority and refuse to either train someone that looks like me, that sounds like me, that is from the Cayman Islands. They refuse to do that and train their own. We as Caymanians give them full authority and autonomy, so we need to own our behavior. When our folks can't get employed, start with the Caymanian at the helm, because that's where it ought to begin. We bring in, and we said that this is really something that really irks me, because like I say, I look at our children, and if this behavior continues, there is no place for our children. Caymanians have to own this stuff, because they are the perpetrators, they are the creators, and they don't do anything to even stymie that. It's a fact. And our politicians, not just this group, but successive groups, have not taken steps to ensure that when you open these doors to folks who don't look like us, who don't behave like us, who don't think like us, and put them in positions of authority, and we see them day in, day out. A friend of mine tried to get a job the other day at one of our government institutions, and while she was there with 4 other persons trying to get evaluated for the particular job, she overheard one of the persons who is responsible for hiring whisper in someone's ear that I have to make sure and get you in. I'm just paraphrasing. I have to make sure and get you in because I know who you are and I know who your parents are. That person isn't Caymanian. Now, let me underscore, I am not anti anybody. I'm always for Caymanians first. But I'm not anti any foreigner who comes here or any person who make these islands their home. I welcome them wholeheartedly as anyone else. But when we are in a position that we're currently in, where it's clear to everyone, even some blind guy, it's clear to that Caymanians aren't given real opportunities. And we have no one else to blame it on but our Caymanian people. All of those in positions of authority, whether they're in HR or not, whether they're politicians or not, whether they're in the civil service or not, no one else to blame but us. We got to start owning that and stop lying to ourselves.
Mr. Suku.
I have to agree with Teresa. I always wonder where the origin of our problems is. Where does it lie? Is it in the home? Is it that the whole system has become so corrupt and abused that we just don't stand a chance, even if we raise our children to the best of our ability and teach them everything we need to teach them? Are they still not going to succeed? Because that is what I'm seeing.
I'll be sending them to university and they come back and they still can't
And
see.
they still can't get it.
Yes.
Still can't get through. And it's scary because I have 2 young children. And I worry about their future. I to the point where me, as a legislator, who people look up to as someone who's supposed to be leading this country forward, sometimes have thoughts of encouraging them to move overseas. Because I know what I went through. I see what so many other Caymanians are going through. And then when I raise these issues and other people raise it, they look at us like we don't know what we're talking about. and we're making it up. But it is, I keep
He
preaching.
who feels it knows it.
Yeah, but this our immigration regime needs to be scrapped and completely reinvented, because it was designed at a time when we needed to encourage people to come here and to live and work. It's no longer that now.
Okay, we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
This is Georgia D. Banks.
Good morning.
And good morning to Mr. Risa, Dr. Steve McField, and a special good morning to Mr. Alva Saku.
Good morning, ma'am.
ma'am.
Happy New Year.
I think I wish the Mr. O.C. and Teresa and Mr. Steve give them their good wishes for 2018. But
Thanks.
Mr. Alva, I haven't been able to offer you. I'm going to say a lot of special prayers for you and for all your family members, that God in heaven will bless each one of you in all the special ways He knows you need those blessings. And I have one question for you, Mr. Suku. Do you know that, I don't want to put you on the spot really, but since we're speaking about courtrooms, imagine an island of this size and our little population, and we sometimes need 8 courtrooms. I would like to really know approximately the inmates at Northward Prison, how many of them are I would say, young men. And I'm going to make a statement, and if it offends anyone, I could care less. The problem, a lot of our problems have been with not taking proper care of our young people. It's like sometimes they are forgotten. None of them are perfect. There's only one perfect one, and He's in heaven. That's Jesus Christ with His Father God. But we, in my estimation, I thank God for a wonderful family. I only have one grandson, and he's a fine young man. Thank God. But I know of many, many young men who had just, and not talking about in their homes, talking about as far as their schooling was concerned and all that. We haven't taken proper care of our young people, especially our young men, or so many of them would not be at Northward, and we wouldn't need all those courtrooms. And that's what I have to say this morning. And I always sing my song, Mr. O.C., and I mean it from my heart. May God continue to bless all, not just a few, the people, all the people on our three islands. Thank you so much for letting me run up my mouth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Georgette.
Thank you, Ms. Georgette.
Talking about appointments and jobs, the Office of the Ombudsman is pleased to announce the appointment of 3 new staff members and the promotion of an existing member of our team, 3 of whom are Caymanians. The addition of new staff will assist our office in tackling our new areas of responsibility, particularly public complaints against the police and whistleblowing. And it goes on to list Ms. Sharon Rolston, a well-known Caymanian, joined office as the new Deputy Ombudsman, Complaints Division, lawyer with 20 years experience, and goes on. Then we have Mr. Peter McLaughlin, and that is spelled McLoughlin, not McLaughlin. And he is the new senior police investigator, and he comes from the police department, completing 30 years of service with the Greater Manchester Police. and he joined the Royal Cayman Islands Police Services in 2009. And then we have Mrs. Charlene Roberts has been promoted to a position of Senior Appeals and Policy Analyst. So I'm just reading that. And just to bring a point across, you've heard me on this show talk about the position of the ombudsman, and I seriously felt that we should have found a Caymanian to fill that post. Again and again, we find that when we create new positions in the Cayman Islands, very seldom do we have a Caymanian assuming that role. Now, there may be some times when you say, we need someone with the experience and elsewhere. In this particular case, we know that the ombudsman that we chose worked in an ombudsman office in the Canada, but was a legal advisor to the ombudsman, so it wasn't an ombudsman themselves. I say that again to say that we see Ms. Sharon Wilson has been appointed as the deputy, and we hope that that is a position that she's being placed in and being groomed and prepared to assume the role of ombudsman. In my civil service career, I was involved in several appointments. One in a particular situation where I was on a panel with the serving governor and one other individual in choosing the person to head up the portfolio of the civil service at that point in time. There were two leading candidates for the position. One leading candidate who was non-Caymanian at the time, strong credentials, strong argument for putting that person in there. I insisted, as a matter of fact, Ms. Sharon Rolston was a part of that committee as well. And we insisted that this person should hold the position for a period of time while the Caymanian would be, we actually designated that person as to head up that portfolio. So it was done in advance. We did it with disaster management when we had Dr. Carby in. I wasn't involved in that, but the Cayman Islands government did it. Dr. Carby to head up disaster management, Mr. McClure Frederick put in there as our deputy with the clear understanding that he would be taken over. We did it when we were forming in the cabinet office the Complaints Commissioner's Office, and we needed someone to coordinate the establishment of the Information Commissioner's Office. We brought in a lady by the name of Carol from Jamaica, and we designated a person to say, your contract is going to be for 2-3 years, whatever. At the end of that, this person is understudying you because that person is going to be appointed to the position. I don't see why it is so difficult for us to be able to do that in most situations. But we have to go for a break. That's some food for thought. And if you all want to comment on that when we return, please do. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. I had my little expose there just now. Anyone want to comment on it? Everybody's silent? Want me to say some more?
Defer to Teresa if she wants to.
My point was that it can and it ought to be done. And here is also one of the reasons why our children grow up and they view the world and they make their own assessment based on what they see in the environment. If our children grow up and only see folks that don't look like them in leadership position, what does that say? What message are we sending to our children when we say to them, only folks that don't come from here have the ability to do work, to do not only good work, whether it's good work no matter what profession that you're in. If that's what they see and they don't see folks that look like them, speak like them, understand them, what impressions are we going to leave with them? That's one of the issues, the concern. But I'd like to give a special shout out to my girl, Sharon Rolston. As we would say from BT, you go, girl. Yeah. Well done.
And already here, and this is why sometimes I'm so disappointed in our own people, because I already hear some Caymanians out there crying her down, saying that this is a political appointment and this is favors.
Come on.
But she's a Caymanian. She's accomplished. She's a lawyer. She's
competent.
She's competent. And we should be happy and praising that she has been selected for this role, and most likely in the future, she could be the ombudsman.
What do you mean could? Don't even use that word could. She
She
ought
should-
to
ought
be.
to be.
And,
She ought
and,
to be.
and
But
we
what I mean
must
is her
take
choice.
and we
It's her
must
choice.
we must take more risks
Yeah.
with our own people rather than taking with
Exactly.
risks of the unknown. We know her. She ran for office. We know what she stands for. We know she's principled. We know she's smart.
Yeah.
But Mr. Sokol, let me tell you, and some, my colleagues, let me tell you something. This is not new. This is not new. In 1974, when the government recruited me, the biggest mistake I ever made in my life was when Gilbert McLean recruited me to work for the government. When I finished law school, I was supposed to go back to Canada to do my articles. And Gilbert McLean recruited me as clerk of the courts. And the government, and I was only supposed to be there temporarily till they find someone to replace me. And the government came and asked me to stay on. And they would send me to England to do the bar exam instead of going back to Canada to do the articles. And I agreed to that because I thought, well, it's my home and things like that. Well, because Miss Anna Borden, who was a supporter, and a guy called Captain Reed from Cayman Brack, who was a supporter, I did a good job. And the government, and when I went to England, the government put into the estimates a position called Assistant to the Attorney General. And they put up, I think it was $100 or something, $1,000 in a vote to keep the vote open. So when I come back, I would have something to look forward to. The job was advertised in England. And every time the ad came out in England, I kept a copy of the ad. And when I came back here, David Barwick, my boss, didn't even know that I was an employee of the government, former clerk of course, and that I was coming back to work in the legal department. He didn't know. He said nobody told him that I was away and that I was coming back to work in the legal department. And as soon as I came back on the island, they took that job out of the estimates. They removed it from the estimates so that I could not aspire to become Assistant Attorney General.
Wow.
And Seymour Panton was here then, who's now the retired president of the Court of Appeal. He didn't even know that ad was in England. And then he left and went back to Jamaica. Because he would not have gotten it either. Because they took it out of the estimates so that we couldn't get. So don't tell me about this stuff. Let me tell you something. We paid the price. Teresa and I and other people like us, we took the blows. We took the blows. We took the social blows. We took the economic blows.
And sometimes you had to duck the physical
and we
ones,
had the
right?
physical ones. And, well, I tell you, I can tell you, Orion, I can tell you, Orion, I would have rather the physical blows because I could have defended myself. I could defend myself physically.
And they heal.
I could defend myself
Physical ones
physically.
heal, you know.
Physically.
The mental blows that our people have to take and withstand, they last forever. And that then we question and we wonder why Caymanians are so angry, and why, you know, we see some of the social issues we have developing here. It's because people have no hope anymore. They've given up.
Yeah.
And it's sad because, you know, I see what it's doing to families. I see that some of our people turn into drugs and alcohol to sort of, you know, just sustain a state of mind where they're numb.
A semblance of sanity.
Yes. But it's not the opiate of the people now. That is, it's not what they do in every society.
Yeah.
They go, they take the minerals, they take the resources. It's like they say, when they came, they brought the Bible to Africa, and while they were praying, they took the land. They did the same thing in North America. They took all them, they chased them, they killed the buffalo, they chased them out of their own lands, they put them on reservations. Do you think that the reason why we don't have coastal control, border controls and stuff is because they don't have resources? Huh? If they allow the drugs to come in and to be rampant, they will not have to fight a next generation for control. They will have the control already.
We'll destroy ourselves.
They will destroy our whole society already, and they will not have gold. And so that is the reason why they need some in the courtrooms, and that's the reason why they're building prison rooms instead of classrooms.
We have about 5 minutes left, so Mr. Suku, I want to give you the mic and give you an opportunity to say some more, because we may not see you again for another. Your rotation will probably be another 4 weeks.
No, but another month, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll try to be more involved in getting here on schedule, because I know I've missed a few shows. But no, just to thank you all for having me on. I think we had a very good discussion, and I think the discussion today proves that we can, as Caymanians, sit down, have a civilized discussion, disagree strongly, but at the end of the day, still walk away and have high regard for each other and respect for each other. And that's what I like about engaging with yourself and your host, because we're Caymanians, and we're not always going to agree and see eye to eye, but we must always maintain that level of respect and trust for each other. And I really want to say I thank Teresa and yourself and Dr. Steve for having me on and having this very good discussion.
If you will, would you accommodate one more call?
Sure.
Before we go?
Absolutely.
Let's put that caller through, Miss Susan. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Howard, and thank you.
Good
and
morning,
your panel
sir.
as well.
Good morning.
Yes, so the discussion just carried me right back into my classroom in my undergraduate studies. But there was a case that we looked at where an engineer for a factory in Jamaica was because it was an economic venture. They had to recruit the engineer from overseas because of the manufacturing requirements that they had to comply with. And it states that as a result of what experience taught them, that they needed to pass a law that because they were inviting people to come in and invest, they would pass a law that would protect the business interests as well as the local employees' interests. So they couldn't find a locally qualified engineer to run the factory. But what the law allowed them to do is to recruit somebody to bring in their engineer, but at the same time, an understudy would have to be attached to that engineer who would take over the position within 2 years, are not exceeding 2 years, period not exceeding 2 years. And believe it or not, so that case went all the way to court, because what happened, just before the 2 years were completed, they fired this engineer, the local engineer, and said that he wasn't applying himself and he wasn't the proper person to run the factory. And it led to a strike. And they locked the people out, which is against the law in Jamaica, anti-lockout law, same kind of law they have in the U.S. And eventually that engineer was killed. And nobody was charged because they couldn't find, the police they didn't have any closed circuit television to find out who threw the stone.
You see, and that's the worry
Thank you
I
very much,
have.
caller, for that. Thank you.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Mr.
No, that you've heard me on the show. That is the worry I have. For the most part, I don't think that Caymanians are necessarily going to take those steps, because it doesn't appear to be a part of our culture. But you do have significant groups of folks that work here. They communicate together, they work together, they have socials together, they go to church together, they have their own, they speak a different language. They are coming from environments and they trust each other, where they will do whatever it takes to support each other. And the reason why? Because
intra-networking.
Because they know and understand the nature of this community.
Yeah.
And because they come from a culture who they understand is superior to our culture. That's what they believe. Because let me just put it this way. I was never so angry in my life when I was like 15 years old. I remember I went to Jamaica for the first time to the Boy Scouts, and we played cricket with a group called All Saints Troop. And one of the first thing they were calling me a small island man. And they were saying, "You play cricket in Cayman?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, when you hit the ball, you got to go and get it from the sea." It's a sort of inferiority complex other people feel, that because they have to come here to work, that we are inferior to them. And stuff is not the fact that we have money to hire them to come to work for us. The fact that, well, they must be inferior. and so forth. And so that sort of behavior, and it comes from every one of them that comes from a different culture and have to come to Cayman. It doesn't matter if they're low, high, or low income. That's the way they feel about us. And we, not being aggressive people, being meek and mild and turning the other cheek, and turning the other cheek when they beat you down and stuff.
And if we had 3 cheeks, we would turn that one too.
We allow them to do this to us. And so the problem that we have, you, Teresa, you saying that you don't think we're that kind of people? We are becoming that kind of people. When you hear the murders on the streets, and you hear the murders now in people sitting in their cars, and we hear all that, we are becoming that kind of people, and that's what bothers me. I do not want to live in that kind of society.
Okay, folks.
It's not a society that I grew up in. I don't want to live in that kind of and die in that kind of society.
I want to thank all of you for the contributions that you have made this morning to For the Record. I want to thank our audience out there as well for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Drainey Banks at 12 noon for a talk today. Have a great weekend. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these 3 beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.